Dear colleagues, welcome at the 18th International Conference Unity and Plurality in Europe and at 18th International Summer School Youth and Heritage. I'm Usmir Mahmud-Čehaj, and I have a great pleasure to open this conference. In the same time, I would like to express thankfulness to Minister of Federal Ministry, Education and Science, Madam Jasne Duraković, sitting on the left side. She, with great enthusiasm, decided to support this conference. In our view, very important in the country, which is through all our history was a plural country, striving to establish harmonious relations between different religious ethnic communities. And her will to join us this evening is a sign that within politics, current politics, we have some new signs, understanding and supporting this kind of our activities International from Bosnia, non-governmental organization originating from the will of Bosnian intellectuals to research the key question of contemporary war, to get insights in tensions and different forms of strivings for human dignity, peace in the world, and development within uncontestable originality of each individual, no matter belonging to race, religion, discipline, part of the world, the history. As you can see, this is 18th conference, but we started just from the beginning with similar programs just in this town. This town divided by the river, but through all its history with the basic human intention to establish bridges. Name of this town is Town of the Bridge, but essentially it is easy to build stone bridges, to build, to sustain, to understand bridges between different human selves. It is the greatest mastery, greatest responsibility. This is what we are intending to do with in International for Bosnia and also with this International Summer School and in this conference. On my right side is Sonja Biserko, and she will, after this opening and greetings by Madam Duraković, have a lecture with which we will start our conference, one part of the conference, and Sonja will speak in Serbian, and Desmond Mavre, chairman of the Center for Study of History International in Bosnia, will translate it into English.
On the behalf of Federal Ministry of Education and Science, and in my personal name, I really am at a great pleasure to be here tonight. And when you have the will, like we do, then even a Sunday is a working day. And you find that power and you will, and that will to continue on and to build on something that is this very dear person that is sitting to my right side, Professor Duraković, has founded how many years ago?
25 years.
25 years. And this idea continues on living, and he's, I must say, he's one of the many individuals, but rare ones, unfortunately, and we are gathering together. But he is one of the individuals that has really become somebody who's recognizable as a true guardian of our Bosnian and Herzegovinian spirit, a true guardian of our cultural heritage, our collective identity as well. Somebody who puts a great deal of energy, work, time, and his mental capacity, all of his mental capacity into what he's doing. He's trying to bring this idea to youth, try to actually raise awareness of how important it is that we are keeping ourselves together, that we are actually, as the name of this conference is today, that we are all as one, because we are here to keep this unity, to keep plurality, and to build on these multiple identities that we have that we should be proud of. As any other nation in the world is proud of. Like when you have Americans, the cultural richness that they have, let's say, because I was living in America and I know how well they keep all of this and how this idea of this unity is close to them. And unfortunately, we don't have this situation in Bosnia and Herzegovina. We should try to keep us all together and realize that we're all people and that we need to invest in education and in science. And this is our only way to success, is that every state globally really has been successful as much as it was investing in its education and its technological development, science, and so on and so forth. And this is something that we talked about previously. And I must say that this support that comes from Federal Ministry of Education and Science will continue in the years to come, and especially will continue as far as I'm the minister right now. So this is something that you can certainly most count on. And I wish you good luck. I wish you good discussions that you will have, and also that the main speakers that you will have as well. Listen to them carefully, because you will surely have a great deal of things that are good and important to hear. So this would be
Thank you
my
so
introduction,
much.
and thank you very much.
Thank you so much. You know that we, as International Bosnia, as independent organization of Bosnian intellectuals, connected with very, very complex and rich network intellectuals in the world, are independent but offering cooperation, support for anybody in Bosnian politics, in Bosnian academia. So you are welcome to be with us, and we will be with you. Thank you. God bless you.
Thank you very much.
I would like, on the beginning, express acknowledgement, thankfulness to all people who were doing so hardly to prepare this conference. You know, you can see now a few people, let's say, in the front of you, but behind this conference, you cannot see many, many people working every day, more than a year, preparing this conference, establishing communication, contacting participants. So please take in mind all of them. I would like to say to them that they are important, as we are important. You are with us. Now we will start with this working panel. Sonja Biserko has been contributing to our programs from the beginning. probably she was connected with these ideas before International Bosnia. And everybody in Bosnia, with insights in the situation of the region, let's say Southeast European region, so rich in diversities, can recognize her. Many people are very strongly connected with her ideas, and much more people know her than she could know them. Then one of the famous Bosnian printer, very famous artist, Bosnian printer, who spent his life in Belgrade, he is from Bosnia. Here that Sonja Biserko will participate in this conference, but she's participating from the beginning. Just in this hall, we had, I think, more than 25 different conferences. In earlier time, Sonja Biserko, Professor Ivo Panic, passed away, our friend. There are regular lectures about situation of human rights in Serbia, Montenegro, Croatia, and Bosnia and Herzegovina. Sonja is one of the most dear and most respected friends of International Bosnia, but also with her intellectual contributions, her public discussions, her public presentations all over the world. She is very important voice of striving for a better future in all of us. This gentleman, Halil Tikveša, said to me, please listen to me. I have a question for you. I would like to grant a print. It is print to Sonja Biserko as a sign of my great respect for her. So, Sonja, here is this present for you.
Now to open that and have a look at it.
You killed photographers. Can you repeat it, please?
I think that we start.
Good evening to everybody. I'm happy to be here again so many times, as Lucy has mentioned. Unfortunately, I prepared my lecture in Serbian because I was not aware that so many foreigners will be attending. But I would like to, before I start reading my paper, I would like to inform you that the idea of this paper is really to present the model how one nation is prepared for what was to come in Serbia after the 90s. It is nothing unique. We already had this alliance of elites in Germany. Today we have in Russia. So I think it is very important to understand how something is sort of growing and how it is coming to the surface, and then when it becomes so relevant that you cannot change it overnight. So it is really a process of preparation for something to come. It took 2 or 3 decades. Therefore, it's, I think, very important also for the West, which is interfering in all these situations, always thinking that by removing one person, that the situation will be done. Unfortunately, it is not exactly so simple, because behind every of these leaders, like Milosevic, like Vučić, like any of these autocrats throughout the world, there is an echelon of elites which are supporting the idea, which is leading those countries to really collapse at the end. But anyway, it lasts too long. Like Serbia's adventure is now already on for 3 or 4 decades. So at this point I will stop and I will read this paper because I did not to take your time. And Desmond is so, how to say, kind to translate what I have written here. Realizacija srpskog nacionalnog projekta nije bila moguća bez učešća svih elita koje su svaka na svoj način dali doprinos u definisanju i promovisanju projekta i mobilisanju srpskog naroda za ono što će slediti 90-ih. Kultura je imala ključnu ulogu u oblikovanju pogleda na sve probleme koje tada srpska elita iznosila, pre svega ugroženost Srba i Jugoslavije, Kultura kao organizovan sistem vrednosti, stavova, uverenja i značenja je upravo zbog potencijala determinisanja uma i zadavanja koordinata nametala stav prema kulturama drugih. Kada je reč o muslimanskoj, bošnjačkoj kulturi, stvarala se averzija kao stranoj, čudnoj i nedokučivoj. Publika je podstaknuta da se identifikuje isključivo na nacionalnoj osnovi i na animozitet prema drugom.
Okay, right. The realization of the Serbian national project couldn't have happened without the participation of all the elites in the country, which, each in their own way, made their own contribution to defining and promoting the project and to mobilizing the Serb or Serbian people for what would happen or what would follow during the 90s. So this is a process from before the that started long before the 90s. Okay. Culture played a key role in shaping how all problems were viewed at that time, and particularly those of the Serbian elite put forward, made prominent. Okay? Specifically, the theme of the vulnerability of the Serbs in Yugoslavia, the vulnerability of their place. Culture as an organized system of values, opinions, convictions and meanings. Played a decisive role in determining attitudes towards cultural others, precisely because of its potential for determining frames of mind and for setting the coordinates for mental attitudes. When it came to Muslim or Bosniak culture, an aversion, a feeling of aversion was created about it as something that was foreign, strange, and and far-fetched. Okay, something grotesque, essentially. And the public, the wider public, was encouraged to identify itself exclusively on ethno-nationalist grounds, and therefore through its animosity, through its hatred of the other.
Ovako krivanje javnog mjenja počelo je kada je Ustav iz 1974. koji je imao federalne elemente u sebi, što dominantna srpska elita nije nikada prihvatila, jer je smatralo da to razbija jedinstvo srpskog naroda. To je pokrenulo raspravu o položaju srpskog naroda, odnosno otvorilo srpsko nacionalno pitanje i istorijsku odgovornost prema srpskom narodu. U prvi plan se stavlja pitanje srpskog identiteta i integriteta, odnosno pitanje ujedinjenja. Već tada srpski nacionalisti razrađuju tezu da za srpski narod nije moguće da živi sa drugim narodima i da se mora odvojiti od drugih kako bi razmislio o svom opstanku. Dobrica Ćosić, ideolog srpskog nacionalizma s krajem 20. veka, je bio posrednik između političkih lidera i nacionalno orijentisanih intelektualaca koji nikad nisu prihvatili Jugoslaviju kao moguću zajednicu. On razrađuje koncept srpske tragične istorije, glorifikuje srpski patrijarhat i dualnost, te tvrdi da su Srbi bili gubitnici u okviru Jugoslavije.
Right. This deformation of the public mind in Serbia and amongst the Serb public was closely related to the rejection of the confederal solutions contained in the 1974 constitution, something that the dominant Serb elites never accepted. They believed that that constitution was designed to break up the unity of the Serb people, to prevent them, and obviously to prevent their dominant position. This started a discussion in their ranks about the position, the situation of the Serb people, and so opened up what was known as the Serbian, or Serb rather, national question. And, in quotation marks, their historical responsibility towards the Serb people. The focus was put on the issue of Serb/Serbian it's Srpsko in the original, so Serb, identity and integrity. And so on the question of unity, of the unity of all Serbs. Already at that stage, Serb nationalists were developing their thesis that the Serb nation, the Serb people, could not live together with other peoples, with the other peoples of Yugoslavia, that is. And that they would have to separate off from the others in order to think about, to give proper consideration to their own survival. Dobrica Ćosić, who was the main ideologue of Serbian nationalism at the end of the 20th century, and who acted as a mediator between the political leaders and the nationally oriented or nationalist intellectuals, who had never accepted the idea of Yugoslavia as a possible community. Ćosić worked out and developed a concept of Serbian history as tragic, as a tragic history. And he glorified both the Serbian patriarchy, patriarchal organization of Serbian society, and its rural or agrarian nature. Okay? Claiming that the Serbs, claiming at the same time that the Serbs had been the major losers within the framework of Yugoslavia. That they had been the ones who had suffered, the victims throughout its history.
Srpska književna zadruga, čiji je tada Ćosić bio predsjednik, postala bastion srpske nacionalističke opozicije, koja je okupila veliki broj vodećih književnika, naučnika, filozofa, umjetnika i poslovnih ljudi u Srbiji, i tada je pokrenut niz aktivnosti za postizanje duhovnog jedinstva razjedinjene srpske nacije. Opšte raspoloženje u Srbiji tokom 80-ih kretalo se u pravcu stvaranja Srbije kao moderne etničke države, slike iz verske poezije, usmenog predanja, Srpske pravoslavne crkve, političkih partija i svih elemenata masovnog i elitnog nacionalizma. Iznosi se teza da su avnojevske granice komunističke provizorne jer nisu bile temeljene sem slučaju Slovenije ni na etničkom, ni geopolitičkom, ekonomskom ili komunipološkom cilju.
Okay. The Srpska književna zadruga, which is to say the Serb Literary Association of Society, which was led by Ćosić as its president, so this was essentially the Serb Writers Association. Okay, it became the bastion of the Serb nationalist opposition under communism, and it brought together a large number of leading writers, academics, philosophers, artists, and business people within Serbia. Okay? And it initiated a series of activities in order to achieve what it referred to as the spiritual unity of the currently disunited Serb nation. So the general mood in Serbia during the 1980s shifted in the direction of creating a Serbia that would be a modern mono-ethnic state. Drawing on pictures from epic poetry, from oral tradition, from the Serbian Orthodox Church, and from the political parties and all elements of mass and elite nationalism. Again, that's in quotations. The thesis was being promoted that, and again this is in quotations, that the Avnoj boundaries, Avnoj was the government that was set up during the Second World War by the communists, and therefore those were the boundaries of Yugoslavia. Okay, so the Avnoj boundaries of Yugoslavia were a communist temporary thing, that they had not been grounded, except in Slovenia, on any proper ethnic, geopolitical, economic, or linguistic common communication basis. So there was no common principle of that sort.
Napori u političkoj i kulturnoj areni su se postepeno izmeštali u široki front, gde je Ćosić imao ključnu ulogu u promovisanju antifederalnog sentimenta, tvrdnjom da Jugoslavija kao državni okvir što se tiče srpskog naroda više nije adekvatna. Organizovana je kampanja, podizanje svesti očito i opasnosti po srpsku naciju i premio se put da Srbi pribile memorandum Akademije nauke i Memorandum je pokrenuo dva glavna pitanja bitna za realizaciju nacionalnog programa, naročito granica, koje su postale glavna tema javnih debata. Drugo pitanje koje je ušlo u javni diskurs sa memorandumom bio je islamski fundamentalizam, jasno ukazivanje na jugoslovenske muslimane, Bošnjake i Albance.
Activities and efforts within the political and cultural arena were gradually shifted towards a broader front. And again, Ćosić played a key role in promoting anti-federalist sentiment, claiming that Yugoslavia had never been an appropriate or proper state framework, at least as far as the Serb people were concerned. A campaign was organized to raise consciousness about this obvious danger, the risk that this presented to the Serb nation. And the path was prepared for Serbs, generally speaking, to embrace what was termed the SANU Memorandum. SANU is the Serbian Academy of Sciences and Arts, and this was the National Academy, which issued this declaration, known as the Memorandum, which was a major nationalist statement. The Memorandum launched two major issues, which were important for realizing this nationalist program. Particularly the question of boundaries, borders, internal to Yugoslavia, which became a major theme of public debate. The second issue, which entered into public discourse from the memorandum, was Islamic fundamentalism. And this was a clear reference to the Yugoslav Muslims, the Bosniaks and the Albanians.
Muslimani su bili posebno ranjiva zajednica za svoje geopolitičke pozicije, jer je njihovo širenje zaustavilo uspostavu Velike Srbije. Mnogo pre izbijanja rata, autori memoranduma su ojačali negativne stereotipe o muslimanima kao stranom, inferiornom i štetnom faktoru. Teza koja je prožimala pripreme za rat je bila ta da će se voditi rat protiv nevernika, odnosno protiv izdajnika koji su izdali vekovne interese pravoslavne crkve i srpskog naroda. Tvrdilo se da će povećanjem broja muslimana Srbe pretvoriti u manjinu na svoje teritorije. Zatim se ističe da pronatalistička ideologija uživa podršku islama i da će na taj način osvojiti zemlje na Balkanu.
Muslims represented, again in quotes, a particularly vulnerable community because of its geopolitical position. And because their expansion was a hindrance, it was blocking the establishment of a greater Serbia. Considerably before the war broke out itself, the authors of the memorandum were doing their best to strengthen negative stereotypes about Muslims as foreign, inferior, and harmful. The thesis which was spread in order to prepare for war was that they would actually be carrying out a war against the infidel, unbelievers. That is to say, against traitors who had betrayed the historical interests, the centuries-long interests of the Orthodox Church and the Serb people. The claim was that the increasing number of Muslims meant that Serbs would become a minority within their own territory. And as a result, they stressed that the pro-birth ideology, this pro-natal ideology, enjoyed the support of Islam, and that in this way Islam was going to take over the countries of the Balkans.
Nizu članaka objavljenih u dnevnim i sedmičnim časopisima Islam je prikazivan kao inferioran, nazadan i nasilan. Izdaja Bosanaca koji su prihvatili Islam bila je omiljena tema, posebno naglašavana na vrhuncu anti-islamske kampanje krajem 1991. i početkom 1992. kada je bilo jasno da Bosna i Hercegovina neće ostati Jugoslavije. U pripremi za rat, srpska elita se posebno bavila pitanjem fundamentalizma, tvrdeći da fundamentalisti provode svoje ciljeve na naročito perfidan način pod maskom zaštite muslimanske zajednice. Korišten je svaki metod za mobilizaciju Srba u cijeloj Jugoslaviji, uključujući i sećanja na zločine protiv Srba u Drugom svetskom ratu, obnova mitova iz doba turske okupacije. Propagandna strategija je obilato koristila laži jer je to smatrano legitimnim sredstvom za ostvarivanje ciljeva. U satanizaciji neprijatelja srpska mašinerija, kako ona iz vlasti, tako i iz raznih uglova opozicije i akademske zajednice, je delovala uz neviđen stepen beskrupuloznosti, manipulacije i lansiranja lažnih vesti. Stvarana je kolektivna histerija kojom su opisivane navodne paklene namere Hrvata, Bošnjaka i Albanaca u pogledu klanja Srba, njihovog uništenja, pretvaranja u ljude drugog reda.
In a series of articles published in the daily and the weekly press, Islam came to be presented as inferior, backward, and violent. The betrayal, the apostasy of the Bosnians who had accepted Islam earlier in history, obviously, became a favorite theme, and it was particularly stressed at the peak of the anti-Islamic campaign in late 1991 and the beginning of 1992, when it had become quite clear that Bosnia and Herzegovina was not going to stay in Yugoslavia. In their preparations for war, the Serb elites paid special attention to the issue of fundamentalism, claiming that the fundamentalists were pursuing their goals, again a quote, in a particularly perfidious fashion, under cover of protecting the Muslim community, the Islamic community. They used every method at their disposal to mobilize Serbs across Yugoslavia, including reminding them of crimes committed against Serbs during the Second World War and breathing new life into myths from the period of the Turkish or Ottoman occupation. This propaganda strategy made a very rich use of lies because this was considered a legitimate method, a legitimate tool for attaining their goals. By satanizing their enemy, the Serb apparatus, both on the part of those who were in government and from the various sides of the opposition and of the academic community, of the intellectual communities, they acted or they took action on the basis of a previously unseen level of unscrupulousness, manipulation, and quite simply promoting and propagating fake news. A collective hysteria was created which described or which set out the alleged heinous intentions, the hellish intentions of the Croats, the Bosniaks and the Albanians, and their intentions of slaughtering Serbs, of destroying the Serbs, and of reducing them to second-class citizens.
Prikazivanje neprijatelja i jučerašnjih komšija kao nečovečnih bio je temelj za njihovo uništenje. Prominentni lideri, kulturni radnici i intelektualci su javno zagovarali rat i etničko čišćenje kao legitimno sredstvo za ostvarenje pravednih ciljeva. Tokom antimuslimanske kampanje, koja je dostigla svoj vrhunac 90-ih, muslimani su bili upozoreni da svako formiranje koalicije sa hrvatskim ustašama smatraće se nezakonitim i objavom rata svim Srbima, te da ih upozoravaju da više nikad neće biti prostora ovde za Turke iz Azije. Isticano je da su muslimani genetski kvaran narod koji je prešao u islam i sada se, naravno iz generacije u generaciju, taj gen jednostavno konverzuje, postaje sve gori i gori, izražava se jednostavno, diktira takav način razmišljanja i ponašanja. To je u genima već usađeno. To su bile teze koje su bile jako zastupljene u svim javnim glasovima.
Okay, presenting the enemy, who had up until the day before simply been your neighbor, okay, as inhuman, as less than human, was the basis for setting about their destroying them. The prominent leaders, kulturni radnici, cultural activists, people involved in cultural life, and intellectuals, came right out and publicly advocated for war and for ethnic cleansing as legitimate means for attaining legitimate goals, justified goals. During the anti-Muslim campaign, which reached its peak during the 1990s, Muslims were warned that any, again this is in quotes, any formation of coalitions with Croat Ustaša will be considered not just illegal, but an actual declaration of war against all Serbs. And they were also warned that there would no longer be any room here for Turks from Asia. It was made clear that, again quotes, that the Muslims are a genetically trash or rotten people, corrupt people who passed over to Islam and now have naturally, from generation to generation, simply caused that gene to consolidate. They have just got worse and worse. It is expressed simply. Postoje sve gore I gore. They get worse and worse. Izražava se jednostavno diktira tako naprijed. Okay. And the gene is getting worse and worse. It is becoming more simple and explicit in its expression, and it is dictating how they think and behave. It is deeply rooted in their genes already. End of quote.
Srpska pravoslavna crkva je također aktivno učestvovala u mobilisanju srpskog naroda za rat I osvetu, pre svega preko evociranja stradanja srpskog naroda u Drugom svjetskom ratu. A Jasenovac je u toj kampanji imao poseban simbolički značaj kao što ga ima I danas. Dela Ive Andrića, jedinog Nobelovca iz bivše Jugoslavije, često su citirana u inostranstvu, posebno njegovo pominjanje kontraverzije, teškoća, tamnog vilajeta, posebno je bilo isticano pismo iz 1920. u kome se kaže da je Bosna zemlja mržnje I straha. Kako ponovno crtanje granica, naročito u Bosni I Hercegovini, nije moglo biti ostvareno dobrovoljnim preseljenjem, korištene su drastične mere kao što su zastrašivanja, torturivanja I masovno ubistvo muslimana za oslobođenje zamišljene srpske etničke teritorije I njeno pripajanje Srbiji.
The Serbian Orthodox Church also participated actively in mobilizing the Serb people for war and for taking their revenge, principally by evoking the suffering of the Serb people during the Second World War. The concentration camp at Jasenovac took on a particular symbolic significance during this campaign, which it continues to have today. Similarly, the works of Ivo Andrić, the only Nobel laureate for literature from the former Yugoslavia, were often cited in the foreign press, and particularly commonly quoted were his references to the controversies and difficulties of the dark vilayet, okay, which was how he described mysterious and unfriendly Bosnia. Also commonly quoted was his letter from 1920, a short story, in which he referred to Bosnia as a land of hatred and fear. When it came to redrawing the borders, particularly with regard to Bosnia and Herzegovina, there was no way to carry out or achieve their goals through voluntary movement of populations. So they used more drastic measures, including harassing and zastrašivanje, acts of terror, expulsion, and of course mass murder of Muslims in order to, in quotes, liberate what was imagined as pure Serb ethnic territory and allow it to be annexed to Serbia itself.
Genocid nad muslimanima je izvršen na premisi da su se muslimani spremali da izvrše genocid nad Srbima. Srpski nacionalisti su naglašavali da je secesionistička borba bosansko-hercegovačkih muslimana za stvaranje muslimanske države dobila svoj prvi impuls iz islamskog načina života, koji nema ništa zajedničko sa evropskom civilizacijom, zatim od islamskih centara, islamskih fundamentalističkih snaga koje su se okupile oko ideje razvijanja bivše Jugoslavije. Ova ideja je išla na pridobijanje simpatije Evrope, koja je tada prema muslimanima imala fluidan i nedefinisan odnos. Akademska zajednica ne samo da je definisala program, već je u kontinuitetu pratila ratna dejstva i shodno tome oglašavala naredne etape agresije. Već na prvom kongresu srpskih intelektualaca u martu 1992. u Sarajevu zalaže se za otvanje 3 naroda u Bosni. Paralelno sa etničkim čišćenjem zagovara se ujedinjenja svih Srba. Tako su učesnici drugog kongresa srpskih intelektualaca u Beogradu 1994. najavili stvaranje srpske etničke države i ujedinjenje svih srpskih teritorija kao krajnji cilj.
The genocide against the Muslims that was to be carried out on the premise that the Muslims themselves were, of course, preparing to conduct a genocide against the Serbs. The Serbian nationalists stressed that again this is in quotation, the secessionist struggle by the Bosnian and Herzegovinian Muslims to create a Muslim state has received its first and primary impulse from the Islamic way of life, which has nothing in common with European civilization. And then, subsequently, from Islamic centers and from Islamic fundamentalist forces, which have gathered themselves around the idea of breaking up the former Yugoslavia. This idea was partly intended to gain the sympathies of a Europe that at the time had at the very least a fluid and somewhat undefined attitude with regard to Muslims. The academic community its role was not limited to simply defining the program. It also accompanied the wartime activities and events throughout and in continuity. And it was involved accordingly in preparing for and making clear what should be each subsequent stage of the aggression. As early as the first Congress of Serb intellectuals in March 1992 in Sarajevo, there was a call for separating out the 3 peoples in Bosnia. At the same time as just as ethnic cleansing was beginning to take hold, there was a call for the unification of all Serbs and bringing them together in one state. Similarly, the participants at the Second Congress of Serb Intellectuals in Belgrade in 1994 announced the creation of a Serb ethnic state and the unification of all Serb territories as the ultimate goal.
Milorad Ekmenčić, bosanski historičar, je kao predvodnik te ideje isticao da je došlo vrijeme da javno predstavimo naše ciljeve na odgovarajućem mestu koje odredi historija, a to je sjednica predstavnika sva 4 srpska parlamenta, Srbija, Crna Gora, Republika Srpska i Republika Srpska Krajina. Na simpozijumu Srpski duhovni prostor u Bijeljini 1998. znači nakon ratova, Ekmečić je objasnio da je srpski duhovni prostor ukupnost kulturnih aktivnosti koje se žele ostvariti kroz dobro uređenu državu svog vremena u svim regijama u kojima je živio i živi srpski narod. A tom prilikom ističe se da su naši najgrublji duhovni i politički interesi da nas obavezuju da nikada ne odustanemo od Kninske krajine koja je već bila deo Hrvatske, Like, Banije, Korduna, delova Slovenije, Srema i Baranje, u kojima su Srbi živeli vekovima, i gradove koji su pali pod vlast Hrvata i muslimana, kao što su Grahovo, Glamoč, Trvac i Petrovac.
Milorad Ekmečić, who was a Bosnian historian, professor at the faculty in Sarajevo, and leading historian from the Serb perspective, was one of the leading advocates of this idea, and he stressed that, again this is a quotation, "The time has come for us to present our goals publicly in the appropriate place, the place that history has determined. And that place was at a session of the representatives of all 4 Serb parliaments, ethnically Serb parliaments, the parliaments of Serbia, Montenegro, the Republika Srpska, and the Republika Srpska of the Krajina, which was the breakaway area within Croatia that was declared as a Serb autonomous republic at the time as well, during the war. Okay. At a symposium in Bijeljina in 1998, so therefore after the war had ended, okay, a symposium entitled Serbian or Serb Spiritual Space. Ekmečić explained that Serb spiritual space or territory is the totality of cultural activities whose aim is to realize through a well-ordered state for all time in all the regions in which the Serb people live and have lived. So, some more. Okay, and that our most profound spiritual and political interests oblige us to never give up on these areas, the areas that were mentioned, which I won't list because they won't mean too much to people, but essentially these are areas which were inside Croatia, and they are areas that were inside Bosnia, and after the war, that were no longer in Serb hands.
Homogenizacija i konsolidacija srpskog etničkog prostora u Bosni je zaokružena posljednjom fazom genocida u Srebrenici jula 1995. na kojem su ukinute muslimanske enklave izuzev položaja na srpskom etničkom prostoru. Iako bosanski Srbi nisu bili sretni Dejtonskim sporazumom, ali su ga prihvatili kao realnost u zadržavanje dugoročnih ciljeva. Ujedinjenje Srbije i Crne Gore sa Republikom Srpskom se odgađa do pogodnijeg trenutka, odnosno kada se promeni međunarodna konstelacija. Važnost uloge akademika i intelektualaca u provedbi srpskog nacionalnog programa bila je više nego očigledna kada se izvestan broj njih pojavio pred Haškim tribunalom kao svedoci u korist Miloševića. To su sve vrlo prominentne ličnosti intelektualnog života u Srbiji, kao što su Mihajlo Marković, Čedo Popov, Kosta Mihajlović, Ratko Marković, Smilja Avramov, Slavenko Tepić. Čak i vojni poraz Srbije u pokušaju realizacije ciljeva memoranduma Akademije nisu naterali autore memoranduma da napuste svoje pozicije. Suprotno tome, nastavili su braniti svoje pozicije i na početku 21. veka.
The homogenization and consolidation of this Serb ethnic space in Bosnia, was rounded off with the last phase of genocide in Srebrenica in July 1995. This was the point at which the Muslim enclaves, other than Gorazd, all the other ones, were done away with within that now clean Serb ethnic area. Even though the Bosnian Serbs were not happy with the Dayton Agreement, they accepted it as a reality, while still holding on to their long-term goals. the union of Serbia and Montenegro with the Republika Srpska was put off for a more favorable time. That is to say, it was put off until the international constellation improved. The importance of the role played by academics and intellectuals in carrying out the Serb national program is more than clear. When one considers the large number of such academics and intellectuals who appeared in front of the Hague Tribunal, the International Criminal Tribunal for former Yugoslavia in The Hague, as witnesses on behalf of Slobodan Milosevic. These included such prominent intellectuals as Mihailo Markovic, Čedo Popović, Kosta Mihailović, Ratko Marković, Smirja Avramov, and Slavenko Trsić. Even Serbia's military defeat in its attempt to realize the goals set out in the memorandum of, in the SANA memorandum, the memorandum of the Serbian Academy of Arts and Sciences, didn't force the authors of that memorandum to abandon their positions. Instead, they continued to defend those positions all the way into the 21st century. Yeah.
Srpski ideolozi su imali mnogo razloga da budu zadovoljni razvojem situacije u Bosni, kada je postalo jasno da međunarodni posrednici pristaju na etničku podjelu. Ambivalencija Zapada je bila očita lokalnim akterima, uključujući Miloševiću, koji je mislio da ima odrešene ruke da radi što želi. Srbi su ostvarili svoj plan od 6 ciljeva na početku rata, gotovo svi su ostvareni, a međunarodna zajednica ih je odobrila u Dejtonu kada je sklopljen Dejtonski mir. Danas naslednici grupe oko Ćosića i dalje imaju najveći uticaj na javno mnjenje u Srbiji. Univerziteti, mediji i dominantna kulturna elita su sa manjim modifikacijama prihvatili tumačenje ove grupe o nedavnoj prošlosti. Grupa tretira ratove iz 90-ih u okviru vremenskog perioda 1941-1995, čime se relativiziraju i opravdavaju srpski rat i zločine iz 90-ih. Tvrdi se da su Hrvati i muslimani pokretači rata, zatim ponavlja se teza da su Tito i komunizam, a posebno Ustav 74. uzrokovali ustavno-pravni raspad Jugoslavije i srpskog naroda.
Okay. The Serb ideologues have a lot of reasons to be happy with how the situation in Bosnia has developed since then, insofar as it became clear that representatives of the international community and major powers were willing to accept ethnic division. The West's ambivalence was absolutely obvious and clear to local factors, including Milosevic, who considered that he had a free hand to do what he wanted. Serbs, in effect, achieved their plan. Of the 6 goals set out at the beginning of the war, pretty much all of them were achieved, and the international community accepted them and approved of them in and through the Dayton Agreement, essentially. Today, the heirs to this group around Ćosić continue to have major influence, the major influence on public opinion in Serbia. In the universities, the media, and the dominant cultural elites, what is accepted with minor modifications are the interpretations and the visions of that group from the relatively recent past. This group treats the wars of the 1990s within the framework of 1941 to 1995, i.e. within the framework of the Second World War through communist Yugoslavia to the breakdown and the recent war. And in that way they have relativized and legitimated Serb war crimes during the 1990s. They claim that it was Croats and Muslims who started the war. And in this way, they repeatedly stress that it was Tito, communism, and most especially the 1974 constitution, and this is a quotation, that brought about the constitutional and legal dissolution of Yugoslavia and of the Serb people.
Znači da zaključim za kraj. Srbija, znači, nije prihvatila poraz u ratovima 90. godina prošlog stoleća. Dolaskom naprednjaka, odnosno aktuelna vlast danas u Srbiji, zvanična politika se vraća na san o ujedinjenju drugim sredstvima, odnosno vraćanjem na prednosti status quo. Ukratko, Beograd je spreman na reviziju svojih poraza. Veoma sistematski u javni i medijski prostor vratio se propagandni deo kulture iz 80-ih i ponovo se afirmiše kao mainstream. Da je to postala zvanična strategija, svedoče i brojni dokumenti poput strategije očuvanja i jačanja odnosa matične države i dijaspore i Srba u regionu iz 2011. Povelja o srpskom kulturnom prostoru, koji su potpisali ministri obrazovanja Republike Srbije i Republike Srpske, Zakon o ćirilici i posebno strategija razvoja kulture Republike Srbije od 2029. To prate i nove produkcije televizijskih programa, dokumentarnih i igranih serija koje cementiraju narativ, na primjer o oslobodilačkom ratu Srba u Bosni i Hercegovini, rat protiv fundamentalista, relativizaciji zločina i Srbima kao jedinim žrtvama, glorifikacija ratnih zločinaca kao nacionalnih heroja, promoviše se nekažljivost i obesmišljava nasleđe Međunarodnog krivičnog suda za bivšu Jugoslaviju.
In conclusion, Serbia simply hasn't accepted its defeat in the wars of the 1990s. With the new generation that has come to power, the official policy has returned to a dream of uniting through other means, of going back to the pre-war status quo. And in brief, Belgrade is still ready to revisit its defeats and to revise them. There has been a very systematic move in public and media sphere, in the public sphere and in the media, to return to a cultural propaganda that is highly reminiscent of the 1980s and is now again being reaffirmed as mainstream. This is official strategy is clear from a series of documents that have been published, including, for example, the strategy to preserve and reinforce relations between the motherland and the diaspora and the Serbs of the region, which is a government document from 2011. Or the Charter on Serb Cultural Space, signed by the Ministers of Education of the Republic of Serbia and the Republika Srpske, the entity within Bosnia. The law on Cyrillic from 2021, and most particularly, the strategy for cultural development of the Republic of Serbia from 2020 to 2029. This is accompanied by the production of new television programs, documentary series, and drama series that simply cement the narrative. For example, of the war in Bosnia having been a war of liberation for the Serbs and a war against fundamentalism. Relativizing the war crimes committed by Serbs while presenting Serbs as the only actual victims. The glorification of war criminals as national heroes, and the promotion of a narrative of impunity, and of undermining any heritage of the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia at The Hague.
Prevladavanje prošlosti je svakako transgeneracijski proces. Međutim, državne institucije masovno učestvuju u poricanju zločina, glorifikaciji zločinaca i promovisanju njihovih dela. Kulturna infrastruktura Srbije uključena je u rehabilitaciju ratnih zločinaca. Da bi se pristupilo rešavanju nagomilanih višedecenijskih problema u kulturi, neophodno je napraviti otklon od rigidnog nacionalističkog modela kulture koji traje još od 80-ih. Jer takav kulturni model onemogućava normalan razvoj kulture i guši njene emancipatorske i kritičke potencijale. A kultura je, ja mislim, dominantno polje na kojem može početi sagledavanje prošlosti i normalizacija odnosa regiona. Međutim, postavlja se i legitimno pitanje da li će srpsko društvo biti spremno za suočavanje. Iz dosadašnjeg iskustva neka društva nisu bila ili još nisu spremna za tu vrstu preispitivanja. I nakon više od 2 decenije od završetka posljednjeg rata Srbija nije došla do nekih značajnih pomaka. Naprotiv, srpski svet je vratio ideju o ujedinjenju, ovaj put uz veliku podršku Rusije.
Tackling and overcoming the past is, naturally enough, a transgenerational process. On the other hand, government institutions have been massively involved in denying war crimes, crimes against humanity, in glorifying war criminals, and in promoting their acts. The cultural infrastructure of Serbia is mobilized and focused on rehabilitating war criminals. In order to approach any form of solving these problems that have built up over decades in the national culture, we're first going to have to deconstruct or move away from the rigid nationalist model of culture that has been in place since the 1980s. This cultural model simply prevents the normal development of culture, and it smothers, it strangles its emancipatory and critical potentials. On the other hand, culture is a field in which resistance and progress are possible, and that things can be done. It'll just take time, essentially. So it is a legitimate question as to whether or not Serb society is ready to confront its past and to confront these issues. Experience to date suggests that certain societies simply aren't and haven't been. They remain unready for this type of critical self-reflection. And after more than 2 decades since the end of this most recent war, Serbia has not made any significant moves forward. In fact, the Serb world has returned to the idea of unification, of unity. And this time, it is receiving major support from Russia in doing so.
Madam Biserko, thank you so much for this insightful presentation of actual questions of geopolitics, culture in the region that will imprint, no doubt, future in many aspects. Desmond, thank you so much for your heroic contribution that we want to be understood. Now I suggest, let's say 10-15 minutes for discussion. Please, if you have any question, comment, you are welcome. No question, no comment.
Processing still.
Huh?
Still processing, there will be questions.
Okay. You wait a bit.
One question.
El Medina.
So, hi, my name is El Medina. I have a question. So what can the international Bosnian diaspora do to help protect and stabilize Bosnia as well as the region from future upheaval?
What can the Bosnian diaspora do in order to contribute to a more stable situation and prevent future upheaval, given that you've suggested that Serbia hasn't changed much?
Yeah.
Well, Bosnian diaspora is already very active throughout the planet, from Australia to America, Europe. I have contact with some of them quite often by Zoom. So I know that they are working hard and are very interested to hear the news. But so far, I think the major thing to be done is really to stop the project, Serbian project, the Serbian world, as it is called today. And this can be stopped only by intervention from outside, namely America, but I'm not quite sure whether they are really aimed to deliver and how, considering the international environment and the anti-American stance of many countries, not only in this region but worldwide. We have their last recent diplomatic action since Biden administration came into the White House, which is aimed to sort of finish unfinished business in the Balkans. So far, we have heard many statements about finalizing the Balkan drama or tragedy, but we haven't seen any results yet. There have been many critical observations and statements about their policy of appeasing to Serbia. There were quite many hearings in Senate and Congress, quite many analytical texts from their leading analysts. There were also a number of texts, like in New York Times, about involvement of our president in all kinds of mafia affairs. There were also many articles in Europe, in Guardian, Deutsche Welle. So there is this, I would say, atmosphere that something has to be changed how to address Serbia. But I see that they do not reach how to approach it because they have a big front now, which is Russia and Russian war in Ukraine, and a lot of these countries in Asia, Africa have taken anti-American stance, claiming that they are responsible for the war in Ukraine and so on. So the international atmosphere, I would say, is not really very much in favor of any kind of true American involvement. The second problem is that this administration is facing the election campaign next year, so they will be less involved. Their time is running out. So what we may expect in the next few months to have some, I would say, important steps. They have changed many people who were so far engaged in the Balkan affairs, like Scholler, Gabriel, and they are all going to be replaced by new people. Whether it will bring about the changes, I don't know. The last thing that came as American policy in Serbia was to sanction our main guy who is in charge of the security services. I heard today that he might be removed. So far they have resisted it because there is no cooperation of the Western security community with Serbia, which is a disaster for the country because there is no exchange of information about security threats or challenges and so on. So, I don't know, it's not transparent. There is much talk about this sort of appeasing policy, whether and how they will change it, I don't know. For example, in the case of Kosovo, Americans are blaming Kurti for installment in the dialogue, which is, and he is the only politician of integrity who is not involved in any kind of mafia network or anything of that kind. And one of the diplomats said, we cannot deal with him because he's not corrupt. So, the only condition for them to be able to sort of blackmail someone is to be corrupt or whatever blackmailing argument they have against someone. Well, Kurti is not this kind of person. So, he has become icon for the liberal, I would say, politicians in the region. Not politicians, there are no such politicians in this region, but those pro-liberal forces in the region. They take Kurti as an icon, I would say. He's presenting the only uncorrupt politician in the region. So this is just an example how they sort of try to equal both sides in this situation. And it's not the same situation because the main how should I say, the most of the problems created in the region are created by Serbia. One of the Bundestag parliamentarians was reporting recently in the Bundestag, and he said 80% of the regional problems come from Belgrade. And this is true. And this is, for too long he was tolerated. And it is due also to some kind of disengagement, both of America and EU, after 2006, 2008 financial crisis, migrant crisis, COVID, Ukraine war. So we have almost 15 years of very low engagement of the West in the Balkans, and in this period of some kind of strategic vacuum, I would say these local leaders got their own way, mostly turning to alternatives, whether Russia, China, Turkey, or any other country, name it. And this is the situation that we have now. And I really expect more, I should say, more pressure on Serbia in the next few months. Well, we don't see it, but this is what I expect, or at least hope to have, coming now in the next few months.
Thank you.
So Bosnian diaspora is active, and we should continue so. And you have to voice, the problems of Bosnia and because the new generation of politicians and diplomats, they treat these countries as one. Legacy of the war, which is still pending over our heads, is hardly taken into account. And the easiest way to treat these problems to equal all sides. So this is, how should I say, of course, the main obstruction. It's sort of finalizing the unfinished business, as they say.
Thank you, Madam Biserko.
Ruslan, we have some more questions.
Okay, please.
Okay. So, first Orhan.
Okay, so my name is Sonja, and I have a question for you. Have there been any movements inside of Serbia that are trying to prevent another war from erupting and that are trying to change the current developing Serbian mentality?
Well, to create this mentality to decay, so to decompose this will take more decades. But anyway, there was an anti-war movement in Serbia, not very effective, but still it existed, and probably will be important reference point for the future generations. Political parties have not been articulate about the alternative program, especially about overcoming the past or whatever you call it. And I think this is a major problem because, for example, the Cuban president doesn't have a true opposition in terms of alternative. Nobody dares to say that Kosovo is out, that Bosnia is a separate country, because they think that they would lose in the next election, the support. And of course, in the meantime, you have new generations coming in, which do not bother to treat the legacy of the wars, which are still hindering the region, especially younger generations. They don't want to hear about war crimes anymore. So the culture is the only space where eventually they can get mobilized. That's why the focus on culture should be really more, realistic also from the West in order to support it. And I think maybe next generation, or I don't know, it's difficult for me to anticipate which generation and whether there will be such a generation. Serbia is a small society with this ideology, nationalistic ideology, being dominant for more than a century. So it will take to re-educate and to change the cultural matrix. It takes time, and it takes serious work of the elites, which we do not have now. It doesn't mean that there are not people or NGOs, individuals, intellectuals who are voicing something else, but this is still not relevant for the change in the mindset of this society.
Thank you, Madam Biserko. Who is the next one?
Okay, Amra.
I think it's so strange, Orhan and I, we have been working for a short period together, and his question was almost the same one that I was intending to ask about these inner forces to achieve some kind of catharsis. We know that you, Sonja, live there, that you persist all the threats as a Serb living in Belgrade, opposing all of this. Is there any kind of front of these people? And the other, that was my question, and you mainly answered through this, like answering to Orhan, but I will use this opportunity. You know, in one conversation that I had with Gurti, during the period when I was consulting his government in some kind of places of memory and pain, he said, we have been under the pressure and in latent war, we as a Kosovars, since 1912. And we understand the whole situation. But today, what I can say as someone knowing that the major problem that any of the people have here in the nations is the problem of Serbs. Of Serbs in Serbia, of Serbs. Okay. So the problem of Serbs, the problem that they have with themselves. So they are much more problem to, let's say, Serbhood and to people in Serbia than they can be a problem to Kosovo. I was thinking about the difference between the situation in Kosovo, understanding that it somehow is heading its own way, and the situation in Bosnia, which is still blocked and under the threat of these very violent strategies and attempts coming from Serbia. Can it be compared?
I think that both Kosovo and Bosnia at this moment, because of Ukraine and because of their perception of Russia as the winner, they hope that they can get something in this sort of new recomposition of Europe and Balkans. So both sides have to be concerned because, as you know, Dodik has been radicalized in situation here 15 years ago. Maybe he slowed down now because I don't know what is happening, whether these sanctions that the Americans imposed, because Republika Srpska is facing bankruptcy. He has no money to repay all these credits he has been taking all these years. So there is something happening because last few days there is no voice from him. And also Vučić presumably is planning to change this ruling, who is now the head of the security forces. That's what I heard today. So more probably, but they are still manipulating, even if they do little changes, they're still manipulating away, hoping that something will come up that they can use for their own purpose. So without a clear-cut situation where Serbian world should be defeated as idea, as is also a way out for Serbia. Serbia cannot move or have not been able to move because the only idea that was dominating the elite was unification of Serbs, territorial expansion, not democracy. Josic would say we first have to solve national question and then democracy. They prevented any kind of democratic changes. They killed the prime minister who was truly pro-European. I don't know how he would behave with Bosnia and Kosovo. This is something to speculate about. But his vision was European. So, and you know, he handed Milosevic to the Hague Tribunal, which really made this, how should I say, tribunal relevant. As an experience, as a legacy or whatever. And it was the only sitting president that was transferred to the international tribunal. So, and he was assassinated because of that. And since then, we have only the regression. And the incumbent president and the party, the Serbian National Party, the Progressive Party, is really, how should I say, anti-liberal in essence. It is pro-Russian, always has been. And you know, this pro-Russian atmosphere, which is now in Serbia, was really the work of Aleksandar Vučić. They Russified Serbian nationalism, Serbian public and media sphere, culture. Russian sort of Russian culture, Russian part of the Russian legacy, which is fake, is now part of our identity construction. And this is all, how to say, I mean, all these identity constructions are constructions, but it depends what you put into it. So they are so deeply present, especially through Serbian Orthodox Church. And I think the main connecting point of Russia and Serbia is its anti-liberalism, which generally is at stake worldwide. And I mean, Belgrade knows that. So they really, even when they give in, they still expect something will come around and keep their idea going on. So, I mean, I think the whole situation is so fluid. And so, how to say, my point about this, what I have said, is that West hasn't understood that this ideology is so deep. They thought by removing Milosevic, things would overnight change in Serbia, or tomorrow removing Putin, the things will change. No way. So it's very important to understand each of these societies and specifically what they are. But the problems that have emerged from the former Yugoslavia are worldwide problems which are not challenged. There are no answers to it. Western Balkans are still, how to say, a neuralgic point. Easily, can easily turn into some kind of violence very easily. Everything is there.
Thank you.